I accept my share of the responsibility in the result of the elections.
If you look at race by race, it was close. The cumulative effect, however, was not too close. It was a thumping.
I'm not recommending for every future president that they take a shellacking like I did last night.
Hello, welcome to an all-new season of Planet America. I'm John Barron.
And I'm Chaz Licciardello.
Great to be back with you at a new time on a new night as we count down to America's crucial midterm elections in November.
That's also the unofficial start of the 2024 presidential campaign, which could be a rematch of Biden and Trump unless one ends up in jail and the other in an old folks' home. Maybe both. Here we go again.
First, to the legal battle over Donald Trump's hoarding of hundreds of classified documents at his home at Mar-a-Lago in Florida, uncovered during an FBI search on August the 8th.
Sources tell ABC News the raid is part of the investigation into allegations Trump improperly removed presidential documents, including classified material from the White House when he left office.
And that is a no-no under the post-Watergate Presidential Records Act. All official records of the president and his staff are owned by the United States, not the president, and are to be given to the National Archives and Records Administration when they leave office. And it turns out there has been a lot of toing and froing to get boxes of documents back from Trump. Some were handed over back in January, but the archives and then the FBI were convinced there was more, and they were right. And they weren't just any documents either. According to the Washington Post, they included, quote, a document describing a foreign government's military defences, including its nuclear capabilities. And Rolling Stone reported the FBI also seized Info Re President of France. Interesting. And what might that be? Well, we don't know, although Rolling Stone was happy to note that Trump reportedly bragged that he knew illicit details about the love life of French President Emmanuel Macron. Mon Dieu. But whatever is in these documents, it doesn't matter so much. What matters really is that altogether, Trump appears to have had hundreds of classified documents, including one set that had the highest level of classification, top secret, sensitive, compartmented information. That would be illegal, just as it's illegal to destroy any government documents, including his own notes, which Trump reportedly would often try and flush down the toilet at the White House. But the former president thinks he has an ironclad defence.
If you're the president of the United States, you can declassify just by saying it's declassified, even by thinking about it, because you're sending it to Mar-a-Lago or to wherever you're sending it. And there doesn't have to be a process. There can be a process, but there doesn't have to be. You're the president. You make that decision.
So, can the president declassify documents just by thinking about it? In a word, no. It is true that as Commander-in-Chief, the American president's classification and declassification powers are broad, but experts told the fact-checkers at PolitiFact that Trump also needed to have staff physically modify the classifications on the documents. Which, if we look at the photo of some of the documents recovered from Trump's Florida basement, they clearly have not been reclassified. Maybe he'll just claim that he was souveniring some old folders because they looked cool, Chaz. We'll see.
We shall. Although, to be clear, the documents don't even need to be classified for Trump to have a legal problem, because none of the three laws that the search warrant was conducted under even mentions classifications. They talk about government documents or national security. So actually, if Trump argues he did declassify those documents, then that kind of is admitting he knew he had the documents, and that does not help his case at all.
Yeah, gotcha.
Anyway, there is a lot to this case. We're going to discuss more of it in our iView/YouTube/Facebook extra Off the Planet later on. But the key development recently has been that Trump appealed to a more favourable judge to pause the investigation while a special master examined whether Trump might have any claims of either attorney-client privilege or executive privilege over any of the classified documents. Now, a lot of legal analysts have noted that it's a bit strange to say that the Department of Justice, which is itself part of the executive, could be blocked from seeing the executive's own documents because of the executive privilege of an ex-member of the executive, the former president. But Trump's team didn't necessarily need to win that debate. People suspected they just wanted to waste time arguing the point, and that would bog down the investigation, possibly delay it until after Republicans maybe take the House in November, or even better, until after Trump announces another presidential run and he can start ramping up the pressure. Unfortunately for Trump, the special master that his team agreed to was this guy, Judge Raymond Dearie, and he had other ideas. Firstly, he said he'd be finished up by October the 7th. That is not what Trump wanted at all. And then he asked Trump to state for the record which documents exactly he thought were declassified. That means to declare it under oath. Surprise, surprise, Trump's team did not want to do that. And then Dearie asked them to declare under oath if there were any discrepancies between the documents Trump actually had and the ones that the FBI said he had. In other words, to swear under oath that the FBI planted evidence like Trump has also suggested in the media. They did not want to do that either. And then, if all that wasn't bad enough, an appeals court this week ruled that the classified documents didn't actually need to go to the special master anyway. So, the investigation is going full steam ahead, with Trump's main defences kind of torn to shreds already because of the special master. Now, that does not mean that the DOJ will actually charge Trump with anything at all. I mean, these are just investigations at this point in time. Actually charging Trump raises a huge number of questions, which we are going to go into off the planet. John.
Yes, indeed. Now, that is just the tip of Trump's legal iceberg, though. He is facing other charges or potential charges, not limited to, but including an illegal attempt to overturn the result of the 2020 election, illegal use of money raised to try and overturn the result, tampering with the election result in the state of Georgia, raping and defaming writer E. Jean Carroll, and now a massive $250 million bank fraud case in New York. Trump, his corporation and 3 of his children stand accused of basically cooking the books, overestimating his wealth, not just to boast about the size of his fortune, but to illegally secure bank loans on more favourable terms. New York's Democrat Attorney General Tish James explained one way that Trump allegedly did that with his own 3-level apartment in Trump Tower.
Mr. Trump represented that his apartment spanned more than 30,000 square feet, which was the basis for valuing the apartment. In reality, the apartment had an area of less than 11,000 square feet, something that Mr. Trump was well aware of.
Based on the inflated square footage, the Trump apartment was falsely valued at $326 million rather than $80 million.
Tripling the size of the apartment for purposes of the valuation was intentional and deliberate fraud, not an honest mistake.
This case really began back in 2019 when Trump's former attorney and personal fixer, Michael Cohen, appeared before the House Oversight Committee and had this exchange with Democratic Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez.
Did the president ever provide inflated assets to an insurance company?
Yes.
Who else knows that the president did this?
Alan Weisselberg, Ron Lieberman, and Matthew Calamari.
And where would the committee find more information on this? Do you think we need to review his financial statements and his tax returns in order to compare them?
Yes, and you'd find it at the Trump org.
And that was at a time when Michael Cohen was heading to federal prison after being sentenced to 3 years in jail for tax evasion and campaign finance violations, to wit, paying hush money to women who allegedly had affairs with Donald Trump, including the adult actor known as Stormy Daniels, all of which Cohen said was done at Trump's direction, and that lifted the lid on Trump's dodgy accounting practices, which may also see him facing federal charges of simultaneously underestimating his worth for tax purposes. Trump's former chief financial officer Alan Weisselberg last month pleaded guilty to 15 counts ranging from grand larceny to tax fraud to falsifying business records. And Trump may have made matters worse for himself by not answering questions during his deposition. In that fraud case last month, he invoked his right under the Fifth Amendment not to answer questions 440 times. No comment. In a civil case like this, experts say that the jury can actually infer that his answer would have been adverse to him, unlike the rules that apply in a criminal case. Meanwhile, Tish James denies Trump's claim that this is another politically motivated witch hunt.
Everyday people cannot lie to a bank about how much money they have in order to get a favorable loan to buy a home or to send their kid to college. And if they did, the government would throw the book at them. Why should this be any different?
And she's right. But the fact is, James is a Democrat who explicitly ran for office on taking down Trump. So of course there is a political component to this. But that doesn't mean she doesn't have the goods on him with this case, which, to be clear, is a civil case. So no one's going to jail, okay? The stakes are still high though, because James is not only seeking $250 million in penalties that John referred to before, but she is trying to bar Trump and his 3 eldest kids from serving as an officer or director in any New York company for the rest of their lives, which theoretically means they have to give up control of Trump's company. Now, yes, they could just go and run a company from a different state. But James also wants them banned for 5 years from even applying for a loan from a financial institution that's registered in New York, and most of the financial institutions are. And she also wants to ban them from buying New York property for 5 years as well. So this is a pretty heavy-duty case, and Trump clearly knows it because he's already tried to settle. Ominously for Trump, James refused. Look, this legal action is going to go for years and years and years. If Trump becomes president again, it may still be going on after his second term. But personally, I think this is a real danger case for Trump because since this is a New York state action, he has no control over this one. Doesn't matter if he's running for president, doesn't matter if he becomes president, he cannot stop it or even pressure them in any way, shape or form. In fact, the last time Trump faced this kind of case, New York State tore up his charity foundation while he was actually president. So I suspect that Trump is going to be a little bit worried about this one.
Over the next couple of months, we're going to be talking a lot about November's midterm election. So let's make sure we're all up to speed as to what exactly they are and what's at stake.
Welcome to contemporary American history.
The midterm sounds a little bit like a school exam.
Say it! The answer is 4.
And in a way, they kind of are.
My students have a midterm to prepare for, and I need their total concentration.
They're called midterms because they come in the middle of the president's 4-year term in office. So while the president is not on the ballot, the midterms are seen as the voters' verdict on how the president is going.
Already a net change of 28 seats going into the Republicans' column.
Americans deliver a stinging rebuke to President Trump.
Seismic win for Republicans. They had control of the House. They now have control of the Senate.
All 435 members of the United States House of Representatives are up for re-election every 2 years, so they're all on the ballot again this November. While United States senators are typically elected to a 6-year term, so every 2-year election cycle, around 1/3 of the 100 senators faces re-election. I say typically because senators who win so-called special elections or are appointed to serve out another senator's term may have to face voters sooner. President Biden's Democratic Party holds 50 Senate seats, meaning they rely on Vice President Kamala Harris to break a tie and pass laws. They sometimes get support from Republicans, but not much. The House of Representatives in this 117th Congress is almost as tight. The Democrats hold 220 seats, the Republicans 211, with 4 vacancies after 1 Democrat and 1 Republican resigned and 2 Republicans died in office. History suggests that President Biden's Democrats are in danger of losing those majorities in both the House and the Senate. In 19 midterm elections since World War II, the incumbent president's party has improved its share of the House popular vote just once and picked up seats just twice. Bill Clinton in 1998 and George W. Bush in 2002. It was in the aftermath of 9/11 and the ousting of the Taliban from Afghanistan.
At this hour, American and coalition forces are in the early stages of military operations to disarm Iraq to free its people and to defend the world from grave danger.
At the time, Bush enjoyed a 63% approval rating and his Republican Party picked up 6 House seats. Clinton's was 3 points higher in 1998 and Democrats netted 5 seats, but they are the exception. Every other modern midterm election has seen the president's party lose ground, including those with high popularity like Ronald Reagan and the first George Bush. And the big worry for Joe Biden and the Democrats is that with around 41–42% approval, he's down where Donald Trump was 4 years ago when Republicans lost 40 seats. The average midterm loss for the president's party in the past 50 years is 23 House seats, according to 538.com. Since the Second World War, the president's party has performed, on average, 7 points worse in the House midterm vote than it did just 2 years prior. That average would give Republicans a win by over 4 points. Historically, the Senate is slightly better for the president's party. 4 times since World War II, they've actually gained ground in the midterms, and twice they held their ground, but that still means on 13 occasions they have gone backwards. In a non-compulsory voting system like America's, elections hinge on who turns out to vote. And often it is supporters of the out-of-power party that get motivated to cast a ballot, and supporters of the party in office can get disillusioned and stay home. So, President Biden is facing a potential backlash for the decisions he made.
I've concluded that it's time to end America's longest war.
The things he could not prevent.
Today, the Supreme Court of the United States expressly took away a constitutional right from the American people.
And the compromises he's made along the way.
I think we can break the package up, get as much as we can now, and come back and fight for the rest later.
If Democrats lose the House or the Senate, or both, it will make passing any new legislation even harder than it's been so far. President Biden would then have to rely on his executive powers. But the good news for Joe Biden is history also suggests it won't necessarily affect his chances of winning a second term if he runs again in 2024. Incumbency is still important. In the last century, almost twice as many sitting presidents who stood for election won, and all but 2 of them suffered midterm losses along the way.
Now to begin our focus on some of the issues that could affect the midterms. A potential problem for Biden is the issue of immigration. It's always been a big issue for Republicans, but increasingly it's an issue for everyone in some very important states, like for instance Arizona, where earlier this year immigration polled right next to jobs and the economy as the 2 biggest issues. 25% of Arizonans chose immigration as their top issue. And that is not good news for Biden. According to Gallup, only 37% of Americans approve of his handling of immigration. So what's going on? Well, it's more complicated than you think. Okay, well, on one hand, it's quite simple. There are just a lot of attempted migrants. These were the total annual encounters on the southern border up to the last fiscal year. Then this is Biden's first fiscal year, a record, and this is the current fiscal year, a huge record, and the fiscal year isn't even over yet. There's 1 more month left. Now, people hear about 2.5 million border crossers a year, and they sometimes think that that's a sign that America has,
quote-unquote, open borders, which is not true.
That's right, Joy. It isn't true. Because all those people that we just saw encountered the Border Patrol. The Border Patrol decided what to do with them. That is not an open border when you're talking to the Border Patrol. A lot of people don't realise that under both Trump and Biden, the Border Patrol have used the same basic tool. It's called Title 42. Title 42 is a rule that gives the government the power to stop people crossing the border who could possibly spread a contagious disease, like, say, I don't know, COVID. Importantly, under Title 42, you are not allowed to seek asylum as a means of stopping yourself being expelled. That's what a lot of border crossers try to do. They seek asylum. The Biden administration actually tried to end the use of Title 42 back in May, but the court stopped them. And the administration certainly has not stopped using Title 42 since then. So what is the issue? It's this. If we look at what's happened since the beginning of the pandemic, the pink line is total migrants intercepted per month, and the blue region is the number of migrants expelled automatically under Title 42. You can see that the proportion of those expelled is slowly falling as time goes on, leaving a higher number of people in the orange region who are the ones let into America for processing. So why is that trend occurring? Well, there are two reasons. One, right at the end of the Trump administration, the courts blocked Title 42 from being applied to unaccompanied children. And number two, this is a bigger one, Mexico's government will only accept expulsions of people from Mexico, El Salvador, Guatemala, and Honduras. So if you're not from one of those four countries, America has to fly you back to your country, which is costly and difficult, and in some cases impossible. Most migrants from, say, Cuba, Nicaragua, and Venezuela, for example, have to stay in America because America simply cannot fly them back, as America has frosty relations with those countries' governments. Now, if I was telling you all this 2 years ago, that information I just shared with you would have been of no consequence, completely irrelevant, because all the migrants back then came from Mexico, El Salvador, Guatemala, and Honduras. But things have changed a lot since then. These were the annual arrivals from Nicaragua, from Venezuela, and from Cuba up to last fiscal year. And this is what's happened this fiscal year. Once again, there is still one more month to go in the fiscal year. In August, about a third of the total migrants to America were from these three countries, and that proportion is growing rapidly. But let me be clear, those people are largely here legally. No wall could stop them because they are walking right up to the gate and seeking political asylum. And unlike many of the Mexican asylum seekers from the past, these folks from Nicaragua, Venezuela, and Cuba are quite likely to be able to make a case because they're escaping from countries that America considers to be dictatorships. That is why America has a frosty relationship with their governments. Anyway, there are now so many people seeking asylum, the system is totally overwhelmed. The queue for an immigration court date at the moment is 2 million people long, and it's projected that the newest migrants are going to have to wait 7 years on average before a final decision on their case is reached. America just does not know what to do with all these people while they're waiting, and that is the problem in a nutshell. Now, there is more to the story. For example, in Biden's first year, they deported far fewer illegal stayers than Trump did in his final year, even though they were both COVID years. But we're talking 20 million unauthorized migrants sloshing around America, John, at the moment, with millions more coming every single year. It doesn't matter who is president. It's a real headache.
Yeah, it sure is. For more on the state of the midterm race, we're joined by one of America's top pollsters, Celinda Lake. She's worked with just about everyone on the Democratic side of politics over the years, including President Joe Biden. Celinda Lake, welcome back to Planet America.
Good to be back. Thank you.
We've seen how historically the party in power usually suffers quite a backlash in the first midterms. If that doesn't happen this November, will it be almost entirely down to the Supreme Court decision overturning Roe v. Wade?
I think 2/3 of it will be because of the overturning of Roe v. Wade. That has usually in the first off year, people want to are not that energized if you're the party in power. And that decision has really energized Democrats, particularly Democratic women, younger Democrats under 40, and baby boomer women who remember when Roe was, when abortion was illegal before. The other factors are the January 6th hearing, the continuing presence of Donald Trump, the Mar-a-Lago files. One of the best things that could happen for Democrats is for Donald Trump to announce for president. That would really energize our side. And then I think that this year just doesn't have the makings for the same tide that you usually see. Senate races have the ability to create their own dynamic. Joe Biden didn't bring in a bunch of House seats, so there aren't a bunch of House seats to move out. So I think it'll be a lot of very hotly contested races.
Celinda, Democrats are hoping that the abortion issue and Trump will work for them, but Republicans are hoping that the high inflation rate is going to work for them. Which issue do you think cuts more with the community, abortion or inflation?
Well, I think it's very different kind of issues. So inflation is the number one issue, although for Democrats, inflation and abortion are tied, actually. But you don't blame your individual member of Congress for inflation, and you don't expect your individual member of Congress to fix inflation. You may blame the president, but you don't blame your individual member of Congress. Secondly, who's good on inflation? I think most voters feel nobody's doing enough. Are you in touch? Do you get it? And inflation is starting to come down. Abortion, on the other hand, provides a very clear contrast, and the Republicans have taken a really extreme position. National ban on abortions with no exceptions for rape and incest. That's just going too far. Jailing doctors and nurses, that's going too far. Investigating miscarriages, that's going too far. They just really overstepped the public will.
Celinda, Biden's approval has risen about 5 points in the last few months, but nevertheless, at least according to Gallup, he's currently at 42%. If we look back in the past, Obama 2010 was at 45%, Clinton 94 was at 42%, this is the same period. Reagan 1982 was at 42%, and Trump 2018 was 40%. So he's well within, let's call it the pantsing zone. How much of a concern is that approval number?
Well, the approval number is certainly a big predictor of the vote, but it's been steadily rising. And actually, the most current numbers show more like 45%. Modeling that has been done shows that at 45% approval, there isn't a drag from the presidency on other races. So I think the trend is really important. It's coming at just the right time. And I think the White House is very, very effectively now selling its programs, its accomplishments, and setting up the contrast. And that's really, really important for our candidates.
When it comes to what has been achieved in the last 20 months from the Democratic side, Celinda, what are the issues that seem to be cutting through with voters? Because for a while, the narrative seemed to be a little bit like the early Obama years. We did all this good stuff, but nobody gives us credit.
Yeah, for a long time, and it's still really undersold. People aren't that clear on the Inflation Reduction Act. The COVID stuff is like, well, that was in the past. What have you done for me lately? But people really like the S-CHIPS bill, the bringing manufacturing to the United States, and that gets volunteered a lot. The steps to defend a woman's right and people's freedom when it comes to abortion care, that's remembered. Young people remember the student debt relief, student loan relief, and some of the climate change, particularly for environmentalists, and that is an important turnout issue. So it's starting to break through. And when we remind people of what's been accomplished, the policies are more popular than the politicians on either side of the aisle.
What have you found in your polling so far that surprised you?
What surprised me is how difficult it's been to get the president's job performance ratings up, and how difficult it has been to get credit for all of the achievements. I mean, this administration has done a tremendous amount, and the attention span that people have around the COVID relief, the help for small businesses, the getting the economy back on its feet, the handling of COVID, that has really surprised me. I think the persistence of the instability and concerns about the economy has also surprised me. And there's a big gap between blue collar and white collar people. And frankly, the economy itself is surprising. It doesn't make any sense to voters, and it doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me either.
Celinda, we've seen that historically, even a poor showing in the midterms, an Obama-style shellacking, doesn't necessarily mean that the president is not going to quite comfortably win re-election in 2 years. How do you think things are shaping up for Joe Biden? And having worked with him, if he were consulting you based on the polls that you've seen, as well as the realities of his age, what advice would you be offering him?
My advice would be to do exactly what he's doing, which is to talk about what he wants to get done and keep on pushing and keep on getting things done. That's the best way to get reelected in 2024. It's the best way to be the choice in 2024. And it's the best way to beat Donald Trump in 2024.
Well, Celinda Lake, we really appreciate your analysis once again. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
And that is all for this week's Planet America, but there is plenty more on Off the Planet. We'll have a chat with Republican pollster Whit Ayres, plus extra stories. We'll natter about a bunch of things, and we'll have some malarkey as well. That's ready to roll right now on iView, Facebook and YouTube.
We will see you there. But before we go, we're going to leave you this week with apparently the closest thing the state of Utah has to gangster rap, Republican State Senate candidate Linda Paulson. Enjoy. Bye-bye.
Hey, Utah District 12, listen up right here. There's a new name on the ballot for the Senate this year. My name is Linda Paulson, Republican and awesome. Love God and family and the Constitution. If you share my values, if you like what I stand for, then give me your vote on the 8th of November. District 12 needs a choice. Let me be your voice, Linda Paulson. Linda Paulson for Senate.